What's up guys, and welcome back to another ant video. Today we will be admiring the ancient ways of transferring ants through test tubes as they grow in size. We will be breaking down each method and picking out flaws and ultimately deciding which method works best for successfully and easily moving ants. For this tutorial, I will be moving various species that I own to get a better insight on which methods rule number one and which don't. Stick around to the end, as you don't want to miss any important information. Now let's get right into the video. Now before we go over methods on how to move ants, let's go over the reasons why you would have to move them. The most prominent reason a colony needs to swap test tubes is because of mold buildup that starts from old food or dead left too close to the cotton. But these Camponotus ants had a different problem, which comes to the second most common reason they require to be relocated into a new test tube setup: water deprivation. Or in easier terms, the test tube has run out of a drinking source. Now this is a rather rare occurrence when keeping ants. But if this ever happens to you, it means you're doing a good job at keeping this test tube clean. Because it's so clean and well taken care of, there's not enough time for the mold to grow, meaning the ants have a much longer stay in the test tube. Now there are a few other reasons I will go over just to make sure they have their say, as they may come about to some of you one day. Starting us off, there will be a point which the colony is too big for their current setup, but that's where things get controversial. You see, some people make a new test tube with less water to allow more room for them to grow into, but that leaves less water for them to drink, and especially if they're growing, it's probably a better plan to move the colony into a formicarium attached to an outworld. Now, this next one has never happened to me, but I've seen it happen in the past, so it's worth a mention. Flooding. Now, this is a super rare occurrence, but it's possible. If the cotton is too loose, or if there's not enough cotton separating the colony and the water, they may burrow to reach a better spot and end up flooding the nest. Now let's move on to the various methods and scan through them for any disadvantages. For method 1, we will explain the most common and stress-free way of moving your ants. This is one of my personal favorites, since it's the most natural way of getting them to move, in my opinion. I chose to move my Camponotus ants using this method, because carpenter ants are less likely to move, as the workers aren't very fond of moving and would rather go the extra mile to drink instead of actually moving the colony closer. I find that out of all the species I've kept so far, Camponotus are the most stubborn movers. Now, let's begin the move. To start off, you will need to create a new test tube setup. Start by getting a cotton ball and ripping it in half. Then, fill a test tube up to about half full and push the cotton down using the Q-tip. If you push too far and water seeps through, just split the second half once more and push it down, making sure it's tight but not too tight. Once you're satisfied with the test tube setup, it's time to move your ants in. There's a couple different ways of going about this, but I find tape as the best home item to use. Another method is test tube connectors. You can buy them, but I don't have any on hand, so they won't be a feature, but are still a highly effective way of connecting two test tubes and having them almost airtight while still allowing airflow so the ants don't suffocate. For all colonies, I will be using tape to secure the test tubes together. So, let's begin. Start by taking the new test tube and a piece of tape that will be able to wrap around the whole test tube. Lay the tape down on a flat surface and set the new test tube about halfway in the middle of the tape. Then, remove the cotton from the current test tube and lay the entrance on the tape across from the new one. Now it's critical at this stage that you leave a tiny gap in between the test tubes, as you don't want your colony to suffocate. Now, here's the tricky part. How do you go about this without disturbing the ants? Well, I'm sure if you were super precise, you could, but if you roll the test tube on the tape to wrap it around, it gets the ants disturbed. Since you're tipping them, this will cause them to be a bit frantic, and have a better chance of discovering the new test tube quicker. Now, if you've been keeping your ants in the dark, this will work much better. If not, it's still in their instinct to be in the dark, so they are sure to move in, but it may take much longer in return. Now, the best way to go about making the new test tube dark is using something like a sock or a cloth. Use it to cover the new test tube with the material you've chosen. Here I use a tea towel. For these guys, I used only the lighting in this room, as it's already very bright. But if you need to use a flashlight or lamp, just make sure it's not too close, as you don't want to heat up the test tube. Now, there is one other common method that is used that I quite frankly don't use, but is still effective. This one's just a bit more particular. This is the method of temperature. Now, I have never used this method before, so I won't be able to show any footage of doing so, but you can take this into account when trying method 1, light and darkness. Now, there's two ways to go about this. You can either use the heat to entice the colony to move closer to the source of heat, or to try and get them to move away. Note that if you are trying to use the heat on their current test tube to scare them out, you have to be careful, as it puts heaps of stress on the colony, and if it's too hot, it may injure or even kill workers and larvae, and especially, you don't want to injure the queen. So, let's go over what we have learned. We took an extensive look on reasons why and when you would need to use this tutorial, as well as covered methods on how to properly go about moving ants. I hope this tutorial helps many of you inspiring ant keepers, as well as giving experienced ant keepers a possible new look into the different ways to go about this. Now, you may have noticed that in almost all of my videos, my ants are in acrylic and Y-tong nests. And well, if they interest you, they're for sale. These brilliant nests designed by Jordan over on the Ants Australia channel have always been one of my favorites to house colonies in. The white acrylic bounces the light really well to reflect on the ants, allowing for much more detail to be seen. Same going for the Y-tong nests. The nests are sold on the Ant Keeping Depot, and it will be linked at the top of the description. Even if you aren't looking to buy one of these nests, you can find a huge selection of nests and outworlds, and many essential gear for successful ant keeping. Now, if you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate you sticking around till the end. And to help this video reach new ant keepers, hit the like button. And if you're new here, subscribe, as you don't want to miss our weekly videos. And if you want to stay even more updated, follow me on Instagram at Antscanada. I reply to all DMs, so if you need any help, send me a message. Trying to binge some ant content? Well, I've linked a bunch of our fellow ant YouTubers in the description, so go give them a watch too. Thanks for tuning in for this week's video. I'll catch you in the next one.